Today we're turning this boring old office computer into a fully fledged gaming PC. This entire process cost me just a little over 300 bucks. And this PC can actually run the newest games like Battlefield 6. So let's get started. Most of you have some kind of old computer laying around, or maybe you stole one off a homeless guy. Well, first we gotta ask ourselves, is it even worth it upgrading an old hunk of junk? Well, if it's got a processor from at least 2017 or newer, it should still be pretty fast. As long as it's an Intel i5, i7 or i9 or any AMD Ryzen processor. Anything below that, and they start to get a bit slow. But what's also very important is the form factor. There are ATX cases, small form factor or SFF cases, and these tiny little boxes that have a bunch of different names. Standard ATX PCs are almost always easily upgradable, since they've got a lot of space for parts. SFF PCs are a lot harder to do, but are possible sometimes. The power supply is mostly a lost cause for these things though. And these tiny little things, yeah, forget about it. The only stuff you can salvage from these is their processor, storage, and sometimes the RAM. Some brands make these upgrades pretty easy, while other brands have already sold their soul to the devil. Lucky for me, I've got this pretty little guy. An old 2017 Lenovo ThinkCentre in an ATX-ish case. These specs are not very impressive and pretty much the bare minimum for modern games, but the CPU in here can run Battlefield 6 at 60 FPS, so in my opinion, it is perfectly fine. Now, there's two different ways of upgrading these pre-built PCs. You could just upgrade what you've already got, or do a complete case swap. You could just throw a GPU in this case and call it a day. But most of these power supplies can't supply extra power for a more powerful GPU. And most of the time this requires some very sketchy adapters that can cause a little problems. And I'm a stylish man. I want this thing to look good. And what's 50 bucks more for some good looks and better airflow, right? Alright, let's get started. What do you need for this? Well, first of all, of course, a pre-built PC. You can find plenty of post-2017 Office PCs online for dirt cheap, since basically every company has had a bunch of these. Now, you might also need some thermal paste depending on how old the computer is. Next, you need some extra RAM. Modern games require at least 16 GB of memory, so don't be afraid to splurge a little on this. And we need a new power supply, since our new GPU is going to need some extra power. Next, we're gonna need a Phillips head screwdriver, and hopefully nothing else. And something small for cutting is always handy as well. Now, for most Lenovo PCs, you also need this 24-pin to 9-pin adapter, since these motherboards don't take a standard 24-pin cable. And in some cases, the front I/O ports are soldered to the motherboard as well. So for this one, we need a male USB-A to internal female USB 3.0 adapter. Now, to put all of this in, you of course need a pretty case. RGB makes your games faster, so make sure it has that. You can also add more storage to it if you want to, but it really depends on how much is already in there. And last, but definitely not least, you need a nice graphics card. An RTX 2070 might not be the best of the best or the newest graphics card, but it can run Battlefield 6 and most modern games at 1080p with ease. So it's perfectly fine. Of course, you could just use a way more powerful GPU, but you have to watch out for possible bottlenecks with the CPU and higher power requirements for the PSU. All in all, this is a cheap but still pretty damn impressive PC build. And it should run most modern games perfectly fine. We'll benchmark some stuff once it's done. Alright, enough yapping. Let's get to business. Let's start by just opening this thing up. There's a button here. That just takes this thing off as well. And here we can really see what's in here. Here's the processor, we're gonna need that. Here's the memory, we're gonna upgrade that. And this is the power supply, and we are not gonna need that. Most of the time, these pre-built power supplies are the bare minimum and are not made to put an extra GPU in there. Oh, and it's also got an M.2 SSD, so we don't really need much more storage, I think. Now, first things first, we just need to unplug every single cable so we can remove the motherboard and everything with it. This is the 4-pin connector for the CPU. This is that 9-pin connector going from the PSU, for which we bought that adapter. This was the pin for, I think, the power button, so we'll need to figure out how to wire that up, unfortunately. This is just for an LED on the front, probably for the hard drive. And I think this is for the antenna, because it leads to this little thing here. This thing here goes to the speakers. We also don't need that. And since all the ports here are soldered to the motherboard, there's no cable to connect the front I/O. And that's pretty much it. Now we just need to screw the motherboard loose and take it out. In some pre-builds there's also some extra storage, like a hard drive in here, but this one's got an M.2 SSD, so we don't need to screw anything loose here. So now we just unscrew the motherboard. Now we'll need to unscrew this bracket here, since it's holding on to the motherboard. Then it just clicks out. And yes, that did lead to the power button. Now, this M.2 SSD is actually stuck to the case with this plastic contraption thing. So first we need to take this out. This is a real bitch to do. Okay, after 10 minutes of fucking around, I'm just gonna rip it out of this plastic thing and hope it doesn't break. Hey! After some very careful shoving, it just came out. Click. And there we have it. It's only 256 gigabytes, but it should be enough. And now I should be able to just take the motherboard out. This plastic thing you need to be careful with, because it blocks the motherboard as well. There we go. You kind of need to wedge the motherboard out there, because this stupid thing is blocking everything. But there we have it. The motherboard. As you see, these soldered on ports take up quite a bit of space, so you will need to watch out which case you buy. Now, since there's no hard drive or a good PSU in here, that's pretty much everything we're going to reuse. While the I/O shield is kind of removable, it works with slots, so this would not fit in a normal case, which is really dumb. You weren't too difficult to work with, so thank you Lenovo, but for that plastic part... And now we are left with the motherboard. We'll reinsert the M.2 SSD later on, I just don't want this thing to be in here loose. First I want to unscrew the CPU cooler, because you never know if the thermal paste has dried up or not. You should always screw in and out the CPU cooler in a cross formation, so this, or any other combination. And then we just unplug it here. And... that's pretty okay. Reapplying thermal paste is never a bad idea though. And after you've done that, you can just put the CPU cooler back. Remember, cross formation. And then we re-plug the cooler. Now it's time to put some more RAM in here. Now you see how this is color coded, so 1 is green, 3 is green, 2 is blue, and 4 is blue. If you put 2 sticks of memory in these color coded channels, you get dual channel memory. This is always better, so always put your RAM in 2 and 4, or 1 and 3. Now I don't recommend mixing and matching different memory sets. For example, these two are very different brands from this one, because this can cause for instability. So sure, there is already 8 gigabytes of memory in here, and if we put this 16 gig kit in there, you'll get, what, like 24? But I prefer stability over more memory, so we're just gonna take these two out and put these two in. When removing memory, just press down both sides here, click, and then just take it out. So, double click, take it out. 16 gigabytes, for now, should be more than enough for modern games. Now, one side of the memory sticks is longer than the other, so it can only go one way into the slot. And then it's the same as removing them. Just put them slowly into these slots, then one side click, and the other, and it's the same for the other stick. And voila! that is all we need. And it's even got space for 2 more sticks, so you could have up to 32 or even 64 gigs of RAM in here. Yes, you can put these older sticks in there as well, but this could cause the newer sticks to run at a lower speed, and the entire system could be a little bit more unstable. And look what we've got here. Front USB 1, front USB 2. So even though all the front I/O is soldered to this motherboard, Lenovo was nice enough to put these front USB headers here. Thanks, Lenovo. Now we are done with the motherboard. Now it's time to look at the new case. This case actually has magnetic latches instead of screws for the side panels, which is really cool. But also really scary. Careful with glass. In here we have a very important manual and this little nutsack of screws here. Oh shit, this has pretty much everything we need in it. Now, I'm not sure if every port is going to be able to be connected, so let's check that. Front USB 2.0. Yes sir, we have 2 of these. Now the back fan and these 2 side fans are all daisy chained together into this one cluster, which just connects with Molex power. And our power supply has that. I think the only thing we can't connect here is the front HD audio. This is for your microphone and headset, and unfortunately there's no connector for that here. It's all soldered to the motherboard. However, and this thing is missing 2 pins, so I'm not sure if this is gonna work. As for the LEDs, power button and the reset switch, we're gonna have to figure out where this stuff goes. This Lenovo motherboard does have a front panel connector, but it says nowhere how this is wired. Let's start by just putting the power supply in the case. When you slide the power supply in, make sure its fan is facing downwards and the power plug is facing outwards. So you just slide it in like this, and then just line all of these screw holes up. Then just screw it in. And voila, you've installed the power supply. Don't worry about this mess, it's gonna look a lot better. If you have a SATA SSD or HDD that you want to put in here, you simply put them in this drive bay. You will need to connect SATA power to the hard drive and SSD, and also 2 SATA data cables, and these should route from the SSD or HDD to the motherboard. But since we're only going to use that M.2 SSD, we're not going to have to do this. And that means more space to shove all these cables in. Now, cable management is very important, and depending on how autistic you are, you might do it better or worse. But having less clutter is always better, so I am gonna do it a little bit.
Somebody asked me if I'm autistic. I'm autistic as shit.
The motherboard is gonna sit in the case like this. So for example, the 4-pin connector for the CPU needs to go through that hole. And the 9-pin connector for the motherboard itself needs to go somewhere over here. Let's figure that out. Remember that daisy chain cable from all the fans? We can just connect that right away to the PSU. This is a bit annoying to do, so you might need to push it in there a couple times. And there we go. And now we can just shove it back there. There we go. That's already less clutter. Since we can't use the HD audio, we're also just gonna put it back there. Now that we're back here, let's also connect it. Now, since the front USB connector, the front panel connector, and that 9-pin cable are all kind of on the bottom here, I routed them through the bottom of the case. And since the CPU is on the top of the motherboard, I routed that cable through the top. Now let's also connect that USB adapter to the internal USB 3.0 connector. It's not going to be pretty having these 2 very blue cables hanging in the case, but at least we'll have USB 3.0 on the front panel. And after shoving all the extra cables in the back, it already looks pretty damn clean. Now let's see if I can put that side panel on there without everything exploding. Hey, look at that. Now it's time to put the motherboard in the case. Remember to keep all of these cables out of the way when you put the motherboard in, because you will crush them if you screw it in like this. And there we go. Just make sure that all of these screw holes are lined up and you can start screwing it in. This is why it's very important to actually have an ATX case, because these front ports here do not fit in smaller cases. Okay, big problem. This thing is supposed to go here. But there's not a whole lot of space here. Am I gonna do the most sketchy thing ever and just just let it hang there? Wait, let me try this. Oh my god. This is so bad. Okay, so it's in, but it's being held down by the pressure of just some cable mess, and it is directly in contact with the case. So I have no idea if this is safe or not. Guys, if you're doing this yourself, please don't do this. Just get a regular SSD, they're like 10-20 bucks online. This is dangerous. But I quite like this sketchiness, so we're gonna keep it. Now let's finally start connecting everything. The 4-pin CPU connector goes here. Now I'm not sure if this front USB header goes in the yellow front USB one or the white one. So let's just try the first one. Next we need to connect these male USB-A port to the female ones. Wow, that is really ugly, but I think it works. Now we also need to connect a 9-pin connector to the motherboard, but the GPU is gonna be here, so I'm not sure where to route this thing. Either way, it's gonna be ugly. Let's just plug it in first. Yeah, this is, okay. The PCIe power connector for the GPU, we're just gonna let it hang loose here, because we're gonna need to plug it in afterwards. Now for the front panel connectors. I'm not sure how this is all wired, so I think we're just gonna have to try. The front panel pinout is actually an industry standard, so I'm just gonna try to plug it in like this and see what happens. Okay, I found a slight, maybe big problem. These pins are a lot closer to each other than they're supposed to be. So all of these connectors don't fit on here all at the same time. So for now, I just connected the power switch and we'll figure the rest out later. Moment of truth though, we need to put the GPU in here. First we gotta take off this bracket. And let's pray to God that this fits. Click. Oh, it fits. Thank God. I didn't want a repeat of last video. This build needs to be done. Now we just screw it into place. Put that bracket back. And then connect the 6+2 PCIe power connector to the GPU. Click. Now I need to keep this cable away from the fan behind that, because, well, the fan will break. And while you should definitely come up with a pretty solution for this, I just tie-ripped it to the case. But it works, I hope. And believe it or not, we are pretty much done. It looks okay, I guess. I mean, it's a little ugly, but let's hope it works. Let's plug it in and see if the power button even works. And more importantly, if she even turns on. Okay, so first issue after plugging it in, the power supply is just running. I can hear the fan. This was the case with a lot of other pre-builts as well, because those Chinese 24-pin to other pin adapters tend to keep the PSU on for some reason. So just like with the other pre-builts, if you want to turn the system actually off, that'll do the trick. But when you want to turn it on, you flick this switch, and hopefully the power button works. It does not. We need to go back in there. Okay, so I found the issue. This connector just fell out of there. The pins of the front panel thingy are supposed to be way further away from each other, so it's not very tight in there. So we're gonna have to, I don't know, tie wrap it again to something. But let's turn that... Oh shit. Oh, it's working, okay. That's good. But I'm not sure if the power button works, so... Whoa! That's a reboot, I think. That's not good. My findings so far. The power button does work, but it's in some kind of panic mode right now, so I think we need to... 1 second. As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, I think I just need to connect a keyboard and mouse and a display and see what comes up. Because it is alive, which is good. Alright, I have now connected a mouse, keyboard, and a display. Let's see what happens. Hey! That's good. That's not good, but I think I know what's going on. Okay, it works, but the RGB is not lighting up and the fans aren't really doing anything. Except for this one, you're working real hard. Okay, so just like with the last Lenovo build, it used a temperature sensor that connected to the motherboard to know whether the case was hot or not. You know, to change fan speeds. And that was what this thing is, on the outside of the Lenovo case. So we're gonna need this. And that's the one. And I think this is what's causing that CPU fan speed to be so high. So let's just turn it off. And then this connector right here next to the front panel one, that's where this needs to go. Now let's try again. Yes. Do you hear that? Exactly nothing. That's good. Now I think I missed one of the connectors for the fans, so I'm gonna check into that now. Yeah, these two just came loose. I think that's the issue. Moment of truth. Oh, look how pretty. I mean, this is not pretty, but it kind of looks pretty. I mean, we're done. I'm gonna go through the Windows setup and be right back. Real quick, you can see that this is Windows 10 because it gives you an option to not connect to the internet, unlike with Windows 11. And look at that, it is done. Now this thing does not have a Wi-Fi card in it, so I'm gonna connect my phone with 4G to its USB-A port. Now let's try if this USB 3.0 port works, because you know, we connected it with these very beautiful cables. I'm just gonna plug my mouse into it. Hey. It works. It works. It's very ugly, but it works. Okay, I'm gonna connect this thing to Wi-Fi and then just download all of the drivers. So Windows updates, NVIDIA drivers, stuff like that. Now that that's done, we need to install the drivers for the graphics card. And believe it or not, that is it. The PC is done. We almost forgot the most important part. And after we put this back on, now it's done. Now let's see what this thing can do. The i5-7500 in here is not a very amazing chip. It scores pretty low in Cinebench compared to modern processors, since it only has 4 cores. But in 3D Mark Time Spy, we see that its GPU still packs a punch, and it should definitely be good enough for most modern games. But this is a gaming PC, so let's see this thing run some actual games. Battlefield 1 ran beautifully with all settings, but Ultra does look a little prettier, obviously. CS2 is a very CPU-intensive game, but it still ran surprisingly well. You can definitely get some higher frame rates than this though, since I had the settings on pretty high. The Oblivion remaster definitely had some issues though. The processor was the main bottleneck, unfortunately. Apparently you need 6 cores to run this game, but it still ran. But Cyberpunk ran great. This is a very graphically intensive game, but it had a steady 60 FPS. But then Red Dead Redemption 2 ran beautifully as well, getting a pretty damn stable 60 FPS, which is very impressive for how good this game looks. Now unfortunately I couldn't try Battlefield 6 since that comes out in like 2 weeks, but this PC can definitely handle it. Maybe I'll make a video about it in the future. But guys, for 350 bucks, this thing ran everything just well at 1080p, which in my opinion is pretty cool. Yes, the CPU having only 4 cores might cause issues for the heaviest of future games, but at least it can still run them. Overall, I think this build turned out just great. It's definitely not the prettiest, and it has some very sketchy stuff going inside of there. But at this price, with this kind of performance, I'm more than happy. See you all in the next video. Bye bye. So innocent.